IVM.
Hi, I'm Rohan Joshi, and on my podcast, the show about crypto, I've been having some pretty cool conversations with industry experts about what exactly cryptocurrency is and what makes it so exciting. If you haven't already, please check it out on the IVM Podcasts Network. Now, a quick shout out to my fellow crypto heads. We've got a listener survey going on, which will take not more than 10 minutes of your time to fill out. So please check the link in the description and help me out by filling it up. Don't forget to tune into a show about crypto on the IVM app and wherever you get your podcasts from.
Folks, welcome to Paisa Vaisa. I'm your host Anupam Gupta, B50 on Twitter, and this is a really special episode because we are covering finance and money for informal laborers. I know, okay, guys, I know that this isn't our regular personal finance episode, about mutual funds and this and that, but regular listeners of this podcast will recall that we've been trying our best to cover this very important topic. You call it financial inclusion, you call it, some kind of safety net for the informal laborers. You will recall that last year's last episode, right? Um, the last episode of December 2021 was with Dr. Gayatri Vasudevan of LaborNet. And my guest today, on similar lines, right? Parul Seth, Khanna, co-founder and director, and Gautam Bhardwaj, co-founder and director of pinBox Solutions. They're going to talk about specific personal finance habits and products, like a safety net, saving for retirement for informal labor. So when you're going to listen to this episode, you're going to come out of it with very specific ideas to questions like, what can I do for my domestic help? I get that so often from people. We want to help our maids, we want to help our drivers. What can we do? We'll tell you exactly what you can do on a sustainable basis. Okay, guys, that's important. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after this short break.
Going for parties is just so frustrating these days. I mean, your mom will make it a point to come and tell you how her friend's son has secured a house for her, and your wife will also find out that her sister's husband is taking her on a foreign holiday, while you're wondering why you're the only one who doesn't have a plan for the damn future. That's why I never sleep well during the festive time. Unless... www.hdfclife.com. Select. Done. You know what? I think I'll sleep rather well after all. Live calm. With HDFC Life, click to protect life. The Income Plus option offers life cover and steady income stream, so you're always ready for any expenses that life throws at you. Basically, this plan lets you plan your expenses like you plan your vacations. It's that simple. Visit hdfclife.com to know more and for terms and conditions.
Okay, guys, welcome back. And my guests, Parul and Gautam of pinBox. Guys, welcome to Paisa Vaisa. Big fan of your work. Thank you so much for doing this for our listeners.
Thank you for having us, Anupam. Thank you.
Thanks, Anupam. Very excited to be on this show with you.
Great.
Thanks for having us.
Then. Sure. Thank you. Let's get started. So, both of you can go whenever you want. And, this is just a very informal conversation. So let's start by defining our topic. Now, I know that 80% of India's labor is informal. We had this very long chat with Gayatri also of LaborNet, and she explained how vulnerable the informal laborers are to stuff like getting a daily wage, getting jobs, etc. So let's just understand the challenges, especially financial. Does this massive 80% of India's labor is a big number. What are the challenges does this entail for the labor on the financial side?
So I think, Anupam, there are two kinds of challenges. One is things that affect the labor directly, and one is more environmental, which affects the country. So let me just sort of take a step back on this particular question. And what you're saying is, let's understand why this problem is occurring. So what is happening, as you correctly said, in India, as is the case in Nigeria or Bangladesh or Chile or Indonesia, etc., pension and social security benefits are typically available as part of an employment contract. Therefore, pension benefits are traditionally restricted to people who are salaried workers. But as you've correctly said, over 80% of the workers in India or in developing countries across Asia, Africa, and Latin America don't have an employer. And therefore, for them, there is no concept of retirement or pensions. We see them everywhere. I mean, they're farmers, they're Zomato delivery boys or Ola drivers or a person running your neighborhood kirana shop or a rickshaw puller or a street vendor outside your gate. Women making papas or agarbattis. or doing some stitching from home. And of course, domestic help, your driver, your cook, your maid, your presswala, or the security guard or your gardener. All of these people, and this is over 400 million people in India's context, they're informal sector. Now, in the past, what would have happened is they would have, say, 30, 40, 50 years ago, they would have simply depended on their children or joint families for support in old age. But what is happening today is that this joint family system, because of labor mobility and so on and so forth, is breaking down, and children no longer seem to be what I would call a reliable portfolio for retirement. I mean, you can't really depend on children being around when you're old. So for young workers today, I think the only option is for them to start saving a small part of their incomes while they're young and economically active, and accumulate savings for their retirement. But the challenge here, when you think of it from a financial perspective, the challenge is that most of us today who are young, maybe not me at my age, but let's say younger people today, can expect to live till 80 or 85, and which really means, while this is good news at some level, it also means that most of us should need to save for at least 20 to 30 years in our retirement once we are unable to work anymore. And this poses a very large financial challenge. I mean, imagine that if we didn't have any income for 20 years, would we have enough money to sustain our expenses? Now, at a fiscal level, this is a big challenge for, let's say, the government of India. Today, we have 140 million people who are elderly. 90% of them don't get a pension. In the next 30 years, this population is going to almost triple to about 360, 370 million people. And as things stand, and if the present situation continues, then over 300 million of them will not get a pension. And at that point, our only option will be to use tax revenues, as government, to use tax revenues to pay some old age pension out of the tax revenues of the government to 30 crore people. But if we were paying even, say, $1 a day as an old age pension to these people, it would cost the government of India over 8 lakh crores per year to pay even a modest pension of $1 a day. And $1 a day is not a big pension. So for countries like India or other developing countries, the problem of pension exclusion is such that we cannot just afford the kinds of tax expenditures that are likely to hit us in as we go forward. And we just don't have enough tax revenues. The tax base is very, very tiny. The problem is that if we don't do something today, we'll end up with destitute elderly in very large numbers. You'll have 300 million people who are on the streets, who are destitute, and who don't have any way of being able to change their circumstances. And by 2050, in the next 2-3 decades, you'll end up with a situation where poverty in general will become a smaller problem relative to the problem of poverty among the elderly. And this will become the dominant cause for increased poverty levels in countries like India. And if you think about it, it's almost like global warming. I mean, it's not going to affect only the destitute elderly at that point in time. It's going to affect all of us. It's going to affect the young. It's going to affect governments, because governments will not have enough resources to pay for education or health or infrastructure, because a lot of the money will start getting pulled into paying an old age pension. So the time to act on pension exclusion, we believe, is now. I mean, we need to today start encouraging people to start saving for their retirement. By 2050, it'll just be too late, exactly like global warming.
That's a pretty grim scenario. Parul, thoughts?
It is.
Actually, I would say I don't even think, why are you thinking only 2050? I mean, let's look at what happened in 2020. I mean, within 25 to 30 days of COVID lockdown last year, millions of informal sector workers in India ran out of money for food or rent, and they were forced to abandon their homes and jobs in large cities, and they walked back home to their villages. And frankly, if the government has to think of all these things, they were really struggling with the cost of food and cash transfers, even for a few weeks, for a few million people. Now imagine if most of the people living in large cities don't have enough savings for at least 25 to 30 days, how are they going to survive for 25 to 30 years in their old age? And for them, it would be like getting into a perpetual 30-year lockdown how would you survive? And how would the government pay even modest benefits to 300 million elderly for 20 to 25 years? It's actually impossible.
Sure. So let's go one step deeper, guys. Tell me your view about access to financial products in general, okay, and retirement products in specific, obviously, for India's informal labor. Maybe how accessible are these products to the informal labor? You can probably talk about a bank account or a mutual fund or an NPS, whatever it is. How accessible or how aware are India's informal labor to this? How is the BFSI industry shaped towards these informal laborers?
Okay, I think that's a great question. If I may, I'm sure Parul has some views she believes very strongly on this. But I think the good news first is that we have today, I mean, we're working in about a dozen countries between Asia and Africa today. But India clearly is at the top of the heap when it comes to digital financial inclusion infrastructure and the financial services ecosystem more generally. I mean, we have fantastic securities markets that have consistently delivered high real returns over multiple decade horizons. The government has established amazing infrastructure for digital finance, including Aadhaar or and UPI, and because of Jandhan today, banking is pretty much universal. And we have amazing products like the National Pension System or the NPS is an amazing product that allows people to, save small amounts of money for their old age. And funds are managed by some of the most credible institutions like HDFC or LIC or Birla or SBI, etc. But the problem is that both financial products and procedures, the way we've built finance, is extremely complicated. And the process for buying financial services, including things like KYC, etc., which seem relatively easy and trivial for people like us, are highly complicated for people who are in the informal sector. Like I work in finance, and I'm sure that I'll be unable to select, let's say, a mutual fund product from a few thousand schemes out there, or be able to complete, let's say, a 6-page application form for a product like the NPS entirely on my own. So what do I do when I want to buy a financial product? I mean, what do? You would simply just, pick up the phone, call up your agent or your bank, and within an hour, you'll have your relationship manager at your doorstep, and he'll be, showing you some very smart presentations. He'll be carrying literature. He'll tell you about different products. He'll tell you about tax benefits. He'll be happy to answer all your questions. He'll even fill up your application form and help you to complete your KYC. All you need to do is make the call, cut a check, and sign the form, right? And for
If I
informal
can just
workers, yeah.
Yeah,
if
go
I
for
can
it,
just come
Parul,
in here,
please. Yeah.
Gautam. Yeah, I think, but for your cook or your driver, if they wanted to save for their retirement or for their children's education, this is unlikely to happen because they don't even have an agent or a relationship manager, simply because the money that they have available to save is just too small to generate enough commissions, right? So these agents, therefore, are not really interested in selling finance to the lower income people. So while finance is easy and simple for the rich, the informal poor people or lower income people, they just don't enjoy the same level of access. So I think the only option for these people will be with smaller means and smaller ticket sizes is to bypass these agents and use digital tools to buy financial services. But which should be easy, especially with Aadhaar or eKYC or UPI payments. And since millions of people today have become so adept to digital transactions, but then this will mean that they will need to convince 400 million Indians to download and learn some new app from scratch. And that app will then need to provide an interface in at least 16 languages. And we'll still need to explain the product details, procedures to informal sector workers and answer all their questions. So while we have the best financial institutions and these amazing products like NPS, real access to real India is still not a reality.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be the optimist out here. I know that you guys are painting a very grim picture, Parul. Come on, you've got like 400 million is a big number, right? I mean, talking of a population that's more than the USA. But I see, last 2 years we've got Arogya Setu. It's built scale at a different level. And I also want your thoughts on this. The government in the last, I think, 4 or 5 years probably has actually got insurance for the informal labor. It's got pensions for the for the informal labor. So maybe we made a start somewhere. Do you guys have any thoughts on the government schemes that are there?
Well, I think the government has done an amazing job in stepping forward, and I think that that's an important role for the government. So what the government has done with whether it is with insurance or pension products or with banking or even health insurance is that the government is sitting there and helping to aggregate demand, and I think that's a critical role. So the traditional finance firms don't have to depend on their agency networks alone to go out and deliver financial services. So the government is stepping forward and saying, okay, if this is not commercially viable for the traditional financial services sector, can I step in and step into the shoes and actually take up some of the role and create a public good in the form of outreach and infrastructure. And I think that infrastructure that the government has set up to deliver some of these services can be leveraged very usefully. It's not only for financial services. I mean, if you think about it, Anupam, you've got the government has set up self-help groups, for instance. There are SAGs and cooperatives across the country. I mean, there are about maybe 250 million people out there who can today be reached through either exclusive government networks like the PDS, for instance, or the National Rural Livelihood Mission and things like that, or can be reached through the plumbing that the government has set up through Jan Dhan, et cetera, et cetera. So I think, again, and don't get us wrong, I mean, to be honest, people who work in micro pensions, like us, one of the key qualifications has to be that we have to be diehard optimists. We are. The only thing is that it's important to understand and appreciate the problem in order to come up with a solution that actually makes sense. And that's the only reason that we think that it's important for us to, when we are looking at a problem as large as this, then to be able to take a step back and think more clearly about solution.
Parul.
And I think not only that, while the government is doing his job and doing a fabulous job by giving banking access, giving financial products, which are small ticket sizes in 12 rupees premiums and things like that. But I think a larger role needs to be played by the civil society, where even the government is reaching out with fabulous plans through the LPG, and things like that, Beti Padhao and things like that. But there is a civil society responsibility that we also as individuals have, which we have exercised through the pandemic as well, right? So I think it has to be a mix of what the government platforms offer, the fabulous products that they have, and how is it that we can also play a little part in delivering these to the people who need it more, because it has to be a holistic approach. It cannot be one on its own. And with such large a population, I think everybody has a role to play. This is where we are sort of bringing up our voices on the long-term horizon and how each individual can make a difference.
Great. I want to end this first part of the episode on a very optimistic note, because I realized that I haven't introduced you guys or the product, and I saw your, when your proposal. I mean, when I started to know more about pinBox and I read into your profiles, it was really impressive. You guys have got like serious policy background and experience. So please tell us about yourselves.
Parul.
Sure. Well, I was actually a journalist for 10 years, having worked in electronic media. I started with a very sort of social causes with the BBC World Trust on leprosy, worked with Baba Amte, also worked on markets as well with CNBC, and my last stint was with NDTV, working on social causes in a weekly program. It is thereafter, actually, during that time that I met Gautam during my days at NDTV, where I was doing a show on pensions, where I interacted with Gautam, and I was truly fascinated. Not only, I can't say I was fascinated with pensions, but I was actually sort of taken aback by the stark reality of how urgently this problem needs to be addressed. And somehow we are procrastinating or thinking it's a problem of tomorrow. That's when I started working with Gautam and started working with the tribals in Nilgiris. It was a fabulous project where we were enabling women to start thinking of some sort of savings in very small amounts. Worked with Seva Women, did a lot of work, and then also did a lot of work globally in countries like Rwanda, Kenya, as far as Papua New Guinea, Uganda, Fiji. A lot of, and the problem really remains the same. Even if you look at Bangladesh, it is The low income people are hungry for access to financial services. It's just that avenues need to be reached out a little closer and need to be stronger. And I think one thing that comes out urgently is the need for financial literacy. Why you can be literate but not necessarily financially literate. And for this cohort, they need bite-sized, realistic, touch and feel kind of literacy and services. So opening the account, I would say, is relatively easier, but getting people to save regularly for shorter term and long term is more important. And I think that has been my biggest learning so far. Gautam?
Thanks. So basically, Anupam, I've been working in finance and financial sector reforms for the last maybe 30 years, and I've done a lot of work initially on financial literacy and financial education. More recently, pensions, I started working on the NPS. Actually, I worked with the Government of India and the Ministry of Finance for about 12 years in designing and implementing the NPS for civil servants first, and then for informal sector workers. And while doing this, one of the things that I realized was that the problem of pension exclusion, as Parul is correctly saying, is not an India problem alone. It's something that is happening at different scales, but is happening pretty much all over the world. And even in OECD countries where you're now seeing, there is a large growing population of self-employed gig workers and so on and so forth, and none of them get a pension. So what I found fascinating was that countries have devoted billions of dollars, both at the level of governments or, guys like Gates Foundation and others stepping forward. So there's been billions of dollars which has been invested in building the financial services ecosystem and infrastructure on one end. So the supply side is fantastic. And on the other side, we see over 2 billion people across the world and say 400 million people in India who are on the other side of the road, who are hungry for financial services, don't really know exactly what they want, but are facing a number of life cycle risks. So what we found was, on one side, there is this entire supply side ecosystem, which is amazing. And on the other side of the road, there is this very large latent demand for financial services, but nobody is crossing the road. The supply side doesn't seem to have enough commercial incentives to cross the road and be able to collect, say, 100 rupees from a woman in a village in Tumkur. And the woman in the village in Tumkur doesn't seem to have enough knowledge to be crossing the road and actually buying financial services, and she doesn't really know how. So we thought that, is there a role, therefore, for tech to play to connect the dots between the supply and the demand? And that's what we're doing at pinBox.
Amazing. Tell us about pinBox. I mean, what does the company do?
It's a social enterprise. We are probably the only company in the world which is specifically focused on enabling and encouraging pension inclusion and social security inclusion for informal sector workers. We are, like I said, we're working in about a dozen countries. And as things stand, we work with governments who want to set up NPS kind of programs. We provide them technology and technical assistance in doing so. But we also find in some countries, like in Kenya, we find that the role for government is not required to that extent, because there is already a large thriving financial services sector. So you have guys like Prudential and others, or Zamara, who are saying, listen, we've got the licenses, we've got the mandate, and we see a market out there. But unfortunately, the agent-led model that we are using is typically only reaching 10% of the workforce. So can you give us the tech, and can you help us in getting our head around how do we get to the rest of the population and to be able to deliver, risk management solutions for both life cycle risks and old age, or longevity risk? Can you help us to deliver these solutions? And that's what we do. So we basically work with governments at one end, or regulators. We also work with mainstream financial institutions. But the idea is we use technology to connect the dots between the supply and the demand.
Fantastic. So folks, don't go anywhere. You've heard the problem, you've heard the size of the challenge, and you've heard a lot of numbers being thrown around. On the other side of this break, we're going to talk about solutions. Yes, there's a lot that you as listeners can do to improve this situation, and we need to make a start somewhere, given the numbers that are quite staggering. So don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be right back on this really special episode of Paisa Vaisa.
Eventually, you'll see the end of your childhood,
Get accustomed to womanhood.
enjoy the experience of sisterhood,
Might get to wifehood
or not, choose motherhood.
or not. You'll learn to define your personhood,
Earn a livelihood,
change the neighborhood.
and get rid of the falsehood that life post academia is easy.
So join me, Ritasha,
And me, Ayushi,
on a journey from station starting point
to station, what now?
next station, Pudin station, and hopefully Agla station, adulthood.
Fresh episodes out every Thursday.
And welcome back. Okay, guys, we've defined the problem. We spent a lot of time on that. Let's talk about the solution. Tell us what pinBox and Gift a Pension has to offer. So, folks, if you're listening in, just do a Google search on Gift a Pension, and you'll find this website, and you'll find a lot of material out there for you to learn. But let's hear it from the founders themselves. What does pinBox and Gift a Pension offer?
What we do, Anupam, is that when you look at India, for instance, as a country, and if you are faced with the challenge of saying there are 400 million people out there who don't have a pension, it's actually a very mind-boggling problem. We don't really know how to start or how to address the problem. So the normal way we do it intuitively is to think of breaking down the overall population into more bite-sized pieces and saying, okay, can we create homogeneous groups in this rather heterogeneous population of 400 billion? And let's say one of the groups that we found is domestic workers. And for them, we've developed this solution called Gift a Pension. As per the ILO or the International Labour Organization, India has about 50 to 60 million people who work as domestic help, cooks and drivers and security guards and etc. And none of them are eligible for pension benefits. Now, when you start thinking about this population, this is not everybody in the country, but this is still a very large chunk of India. And the cost, if the government was to step forward and say, okay, we'll pay $1 a day to this population, it'll end up costing about 150 lakh crores a year to pay just the domestic help a pension of $1 a day when they're old. Now, the interesting part is when you look at this population, they're all around us. Most of them earn reasonable incomes while they are young. And it should be feasible for them to save a small part of that income for their old age. So now if you think, let's say there's a cook and she's, say, 25 years old, and she opened an NPS account today and started saving, say, 500 rupees a month. She could actually get a pension based on what we're seeing on NPS. She could get a pension of about 7,500 rupees a month when she's old. And I'm talking 2022 prices. I mean, this is inflation index pension of 7,500 rupees. So this is almost the same that she might be earning today. So which could give her enough to support herself when she stops working. But the problem is she doesn't know about the NPS. She doesn't fully appreciate that she needs to start saving for her old age. Most of her current money or whatever income she's earning is being spent on, let's say, taking care of her children or her children's education or just generally household expenses. And as things stand, if nothing is done, there's a 100% probability that your cook will fall into poverty the moment she stops working, simply because she's not saved for her retirement. As a group, an important problem for, what we found was when we thought about domestic help is that the big problem is that they don't come together as a group. They're all individuals. They're all hidden away, and they're in fact known as the invisible workforce. So they're hidden away in millions of households across the country. And the cost of reaching them, educating them, helping them to open, say, an NPS account would be for a distributor, would be the same as, say, selling a financial service to Anupam. So, and as we've just discussed, it just makes so much more sense to sell finance to higher income people than to domestic help. And because they don't have anybody advising them and anybody assisting them or hand holding them, most of this 50 million population is going to be poor when they're old. And so that's when we thought of Gift a Pension. Maybe Parul can tell us a little more about it.
I think if you just get a little granular on how Gift a Pension actually started. So how we thought about the concept as well. Usually we would speak to our clients or our partners or speak at conferences, at social events, and everybody would hear about what we're talking and they would say, this is very interesting, but can you help me open a pension account for my nanny or my cook or my driver? And we thought that we really can't reach out to them in individual homes. It's the cost of reaching out is very expensive. So how do we actually get to and reach to that one individual? is when we realized that millions of people like us who are genuinely concerned about the financial health of our domestic health, we give them loans, we help them save, we send them to our doctors when they are unwell. Importantly, millions of people, while the pandemic was going on, didn't even stop the salaries of these domestic help, right? So clearly, we are very much interested in this cohort. So it's when we realize that you and I, as employers, or all the listeners of the shows, and otherwise who are employers, are the best relationship managers for the domestic help. In fact, I know many people who have helped open bank accounts for their domestic help or their staff, and they have even people have helped them set up pension accounts, right? So, but this was not happening in large numbers because it was just too much effort. I know people have spent 10-15 days running around to banks, getting their paperwork done, talking to agents to set up accounts or pension accounts for their domestic help. So, but one thing is clear, that there is a large civil society that is willing to help their domestic help and willing to talk to them about the importance of savings and financial planning, and even willing to co-contribute, small amounts towards their account. But the challenge was, how do we motivate millions to do this, right? So we ran some focus group discussions and interviews with people, and we realized that the only way to get some scale was to make processes very simple, easy, and reduce the time and effort from 15 days to 15 minutes. And that was the only way this could, I think, work at scale. So we would need an app that would allow employees to set up an NPS account or a cook in a few minutes. And your cook should be able to easily again use that same app to manage their NPS account, check their balances, how much money do they have, touch and feel the money, the exact services that you and I receive. And when they stop working for us or go and work somewhere else or go back to their village eventually, they should still be able to use that same interface to contribute and see their pension benefits, right, going forward. But the reality was, Anupam, that the only app that both my cook and I use is WhatsApp. So we actually met Avijit Bose, who is the CEO of WhatsApp, and we discussed the problem with him. And he immediately nominated a team to work closely with us to develop a solution where a person can use WhatsApp to open a pension account for the domestic help. And the domestic help can then simply use their WhatsApp on their phone in any language that they use and manage their own NPS account. So it was like a perfect fit and a win-win at both ends. So the employer and the domestic help can simply use UPI wallets, WhatsApp Pay, Google Pay, Phone Pay, whatever, to send savings directly and instantly into their domestic help's NPS account in real time. So we then met Sumit Shukla. He is the CEO of HDFC Pension, the largest pension fund manager for NPS. And Sumit enthusiastically agreed to start and support Gift to Pension and helped radically simplify the process and KYC procedures for opening the NPS account. So Gift to Pension is now simple and easy, a national level platform. Anyone can now use their WhatsApp to open an NPS account with HDFC Pension for their domestic help within a few minutes and contribute to the NPS accounts to help them get started. That's how easy and simple it is now.
Great. So before I go into, the message to the listeners, I have one question. It's a little bit, I'm just thinking that
Yeah.
the NPS is a bit of a tricky product in the sense that it's a long-term product. You can't mess with it once you start it, in the sense that you can't liquidate it. And whereas these domestic, the laborers, their financial conditions are very unpredictable. Sometimes they need money, sometimes an emergency happens, God forbid. Sometimes they don't, which is the good part. And a lot of conversations I've had with people, who really want to help, as employers, their attention goes towards, why not just set up a mutual fund for them? Okay, they might be coming from the best of intentions, probably because the mutual fund is more liquid or whatever it is. You can start with an emergency corpus, put it in a liquid fund, blah, blah, etc. How does this, work? Because you've got the NPS, which is a great product, low cost, long-term, secure, stuff like that, versus the needs of the domestic health.
So I think, sorry, Anupam, Gautam, I'll just say a few things and I'll give to the. I think the most important thing to hear is that it's not an either or situation, right? I think pretty much like you and I, we have to think of financial services that are holistic. So that means immediate, short-term, and long-term. The needs of the domestic help have to be equated with exactly what my needs as a woman are today. Is that I'm a working woman, and I'll run a parallel with my cook as well. She's working as well. Both of us have children. Both of us want to save for the short term, 5 to 10 years, where we want to send our children. She wants to send to school. I'm sending my children to college. We need to have savings enough for that. But at the same time, statistics also show that women outlive men, live longer. Old age will give a lot of similar kind of expenditures in terms of medical, and both of us will need savings after we stop working. The difference is, Anupam, that I have an age where I want to stop working, but my cook does not. She does not know when she's going to stop working, so she'll keep working as long as she can. And the difference is because I have long-term savings and assets to fall back on. She may or may not have long-term savings unless she doesn't think about it today. So it is really a holistic view that needs to be taken. I think mutual funds is a great way to save as well, which are required as well. I think there is enough thought to think that all people need equity, they need debt. Those instruments are very well managed and calibrated in the kind of products that we offer through mutual funds as well. So I think it's not an either or at
Makes
all.
sense.
Gautam?
Gautam?
No, I think you're absolutely right, and Parul has correctly said this. That I think you can't have a one size fits all. So NPS is not an umbrella saving scheme. The good thing is, of course, the NPS does provide some liquidity, so you can withdraw thrice, over the lifetime of the product till you retire. Some parts, say about a quarter of your savings that you, but it's still not the best solution in terms of withdrawing from retirement. So my sense is that if you've got 100 rupees to save, ideally, half of that money should go towards retirement. About 40% of the money should go towards liquid savings for known future expenditures, and about 10% should go into an insurance product. And I think the reason insurance is important is because what Parul was mentioning initially was that, when we talk to the people who were walking back from Bombay and Delhi and, Calcutta, we said कि भाई आप तो Uber चलाते थे, आप तो, आपकी तो दुकान थी, आपके पास क्यों नहीं है पैसे? And we realized that they've said कि साहब हम save करते हैं, we do save. It's not that we don't save. The problem is that all our savings keep getting wiped out because of emergencies. So किसी का एक्सीडेंट हो गया, बच्चा बीमार हो गया, गाय मर गई गांव में, या फसल खराब हो गई. So, and these are all insurable risks. People were actually using savings or expensive emergency loans to take care of their emergencies or their risks. Now, risk management using savings is a terrible idea, or risk management using credit, an expensive credit, is a terrible idea because it's wiping away your past savings. It's also mortgaging future surplus income in the favor of, let's say, paying a loan back instead of saving for your future. So our sense is that you need a composite solution. We are still NPS. The good thing about NPS is it allows third-party contributions. So NPS is the only product where Anupam can open an account for Gautam, or help Gautam to open an account and actually put money in Gautam's pension account, which I think is a big win. Unfortunately, mutual funds may Anupam or Gautam can't even put money into our wives or children's account. Insurance may be thoda sa gray area. So what we're trying to do is trying to see how, without compromising the regulatory requirements, is it feasible to create a more integrated product? We're not there yet. It's all on the drawing board to say, when Anupam wants to open a pension account for his cook, can he also give her an option and talk to her about mutual funds? And maybe for starters, encourage her कि भाई आप अपना 500 रुपए डालिए म्यूचुअल फंड में, मैं अपना 500 रुपए आपके retirement account में डालता हूँ. So things like this can be done. But I guess some of this will be by learning and then doing. Some of this is also on the drawing board. Some of this will come in from, let's say, feedback from thinking people like yourself, where we'll be able to improve the solution as we go along.
I hope my listeners are also thinking, and that's why the next question, Gautam, is to start winding down the episode. What is your message to our listeners? And I'm going to make a small comment out here for the listeners also, guys. So if any of you are employers of informal labor, I don't know, maybe some of you guys have your own startups, you guys are startup founders. I know that the Zomatos and the Swiggies and the Ubers and the urban companies of the world have, my guess is, aggregated probably a very large base of informal laborers. So if you guys know these companies or if you guys are working in these companies, this question is especially for you guys. Gautam, how do we solve this at scale? How does pinBox solve this at scale? Or, just asking it bluntly, where do we start? If someone is listening to us right now and he wants to take the next step, what would you tell him?
Uh, Thanks. I think that's a great question. And so I see this as two levels. One, I think at the level of, what can we do as individuals? And I think maybe I'd leave that to Parul to talk about how we as individuals can do something using, say, something like gift to pension. But what we've also done, Anupam, is that we've built the tech in a way where today, if, say, Zomato wants to offer a pension solution to their delivery boys, it is feasible for us to embed this solution on a Zomato delivery boy's app itself. So he doesn't have to go anywhere. He just punches a button on the Zomato app and it opens his WhatsApp, he opens his pension account, and he's able to save using the Zomato app, using any UPI wallet whenever he wants. If he leaves Zomato and joins Swiggy or, joins Amazon as a delivery boy, he can continue to save without compromising his ability and without Zomato being responsible for making sure that they're handholding. So we have an embedded solution. We are also working with, say, we're starting to work with the state government where we're going to be delivering an integrated social protection solution of the kind that you were talking about with Anganwadi women. Who are, typically the social workers in state governments. Anganwadi women actually taking up the doing the heavy lifting in terms of education and field level meetings to help people to understand products and processes and so on and so forth. And then all of them will simply use WhatsApp on their phones or whatever to be able to activate pension accounts. So I think there is already some work that we're doing at scaling this beyond, let's say, what we're doing with domestic help. But maybe as for your listeners and for all of us as individuals or as citizens, there is also some way where we can help. And maybe Parul, you could you tell us a little about
Sure, sure. I think each of your listeners has the power to change the outcome, at least for one or two people in their homes who have done so much for them and their families. So I think what is required is a dialogue with the domestic help on why it is essential for them to save for the long term. And I think this needs to start today. All you need to do is visit gifttopension.com. We have simple calculators, explainer videos, short films that will help you both understand and explain the NPS features and benefits to your help. Then simply just save our WhatsApp number. It's 08024002000 as a WhatsApp contact, and just send a hi. And thereafter, it'll just take you a few minutes over a simple chat to activate your domestic health's
Give me that
NPS
number
account.
again a little bit slowly, Parul. 080?
Sure. It's 08024002000.
So that, when anyone's listening and they want to get started, just say hi. First of all, of course, add this in your contact list, 08024002000, and just say hi. And I'm sure that that Parul and Gautam can take it from there. Please go on, Parul, please.
Yeah. And I think we just need to remember three things while we're opening the account. So I have three things ready. To open the NPS account, your domestic help's mobile number should be linked to their Aadhaar, which is quite a normal thing for that to happen as an eKYC. They will need to have a bank account because no cash transactions or anything happen now. And for the security of their money, bank accounts are essential. Ideally, they should have a UPI ID. It could be WhatsApp Pay, Google Pay, Phone Pay, Bheem. But if they don't have one, it's quite easy to help them set up a UPI ID as well. My recommendation would be actually just start with the WhatsApp Pay itself because you can make the payment within the chat itself. You don't need to leave it at all. Ideally, it is encouraged that if the listeners themselves could put in money into the NPS account every month till their domestic help is working with them or till they are able to do it themselves. But the best part is, or the convenient part is, that they can stop contributing whenever they want. And it is also possible that if there is a domestic help who works in multiple houses as a cleaner or whatever, it is also possible for Anupam, Gautam, and Parul to contribute to that domestic helps account as well. So it is a one-on-one as well, or for somebody who is working elsewhere, who has an existing account, you can also help to contribute into their account. I would say it's important to start putting in some money ourselves, but also encourage the domestic help to put in money. I think that just sort of also inculcates a discipline, encourages a savings habit, and will also help them once they stop working or go elsewhere, that they will know that they have this account and this account will move with them, and hence they can continue saving into their account.
Yeah, habit is really important, right? Because they need to continue this throughout their working life.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yes, yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
And the beauty of this is that
And
it doesn't depend on the employer. That I change employer, I can still go on because it's my salary.
That's right.
yes,
Yeah?
that's right.
Sorry, Parul, you were saying.
And
Please continue.
just another beautiful feature of this is, Anupam, that you may have money right now a particular month, or the domestic help doesn't have, if they make a commitment for every month, but they don't have money, and we understand that they may not have money every month to contribute the same amount for if they have other expenses to take care of. There are no penalties in NPS, right? So you can contribute ad hoc as well. So if you have 5,000 rupees in one go or 1,000 rupees in one go, it even allows you to top up and be able to continue saving the same amounts with the same kind of conviction. So that is another thing that is very easy for employers and for domestic help to continue saving.
Or you can give
saying.
Diwali bonuses. Basically, you could, let's say, instead of a Diwali bonus, or whatever, it's feasible to then say, okay, fine, I'm putting, 1 month salary into your NPS account, or half of that into your NPS account, or whatever. For
NPS
Christmas,
is also low ticket, right? I mean, we can start with what, 100, 500 rupees? If you
500 rupees. 500 is the minimum.
500 rupees? Yeah. 500 rupees is what? That's probably one meal that we have. So I'm pretty sure that we can, on a monthly basis, of course, make
It's
a
a
start.
cup of
And
coffee.
yeah, you're right. Man, that is a reality check, huh? Anyway, sorry. So there you go, folks. You can start with something as low as that. Keep it going every month for your domestic help, so that the domestic help sees that you're also contributing, and it kind of gives a little bit of tailwind, right? I mean, she sees that the employer is contributing. She is also probably encouraged to add in that. Do you have anything on the behaviors out here that what you guys have seen so far?
So there's actually been a mixed bag, and I have to be very honest, Anupam. The outlook of the domestic help sometimes is that they rather receive cash benefits upfront. कि instead of putting it in my khata, आप मेरे को 500 रुपए मेरे हाथ में दे दो. But I think the result of good quality education and the statement of accounts that they have received and seen their money grow, and packaged with the reality check of the pandemic of not having adequate savings, has actually lent to a boost of people realizing that they do need to put away money where there could be a potential permanent pandemic situation should there be not enough monies to rely on. So I think that has been a bit of a paradigm shift in itself. Concerns around secure products, being able to see benefits, the same kind of product that all government employees are using currently, which is the NPS, which is being offered, are things that give a cushion and help people sort of get more trust into the system, and hence be able to gift and contribute, regularly save into NPS.
Okay, last question. How do we make this sustainable, guys? How can our listeners take your message, carry it forward? Hopefully, some of them have liked your product and they want to do something. So, Gautam, Parul, both of you all, please tell us how we can make this sustainable. How can our listeners carry this message forward? Maybe if there's a startup founder out there, can you please call up the Zomatos and Swiggies? Whatever.
Yes.
You guys tell me.
I think the only way to do it is, I'll talk about the one-on-one, is it sustains, scales, and becomes more meaningful if each one of us decides, right? So each one gift one, right? At least to one person. You don't need any preparation. You just need intention. You can start doing it today. And then pass on your experience with your friends and family, and make it into like a prompt and a movement is when it goes on, right? Put out selfies with your domestic help, set out your stories. Everybody knows how to use social media. Is when it becomes so encouraging, not only for the employer, but more importantly for the receiver, and say this benefit is available for them. It is a reality for them. They are being seen as someone who has worked hard all their lives and deserves this benefit. And we as people who are responsible employers have a now opportunity to give back. Probably we could, and if we do this well, we can probably have 25 million NPS accounts for domestic help by the month end, right? Because it only takes 15 minutes to gift a pension. That's all.
Nice. Gautam?
I have another way of thinking about this. We've experimented with this, and I think this is something that I find very exciting. Is that it's feasible for employers also, large corporates like the Tatas or Reliance or IBM, to actually adopt gift to pension for their own companies, where I, as an employer, could actually be encouraging and motivating my own employees to gift a pension to their domestic help. So, and we've done this with one of the larger consulting firms, and they did this with 1,200 of their employees. And what they also said was that we'll use CSR funds to co-contribute to the pension NPS contributions of your domestic help. So while you can't use CSR money for your own employees, but nothing stops you from using CSR funds to pay a co-contribution into the NPS account of the domestic help of your staff. So this was one thing, and I think this could perhaps help to scale this further. And the second thing, I think, again, something which seems currently a bit of a bad idea, but I think it's feasible, is where a company can adopt a certain cohort. So imagine if, say, Reliance could say that, okay, we are adopting the game wardens in Kaziranga Park. So those 2,000 people get very shoddy, social protection benefits. Why don't we step forward, help them to open NPS accounts, and actually for the next, say, 5 years, over the next 10 years, we will put out of our CSR budget some money into their retirement account and buy them some insurance. Or let's say do this for women members of a cooperative in, say, Gujarat. So it's feasible to do things like this, where you can identify a cohort. The interesting part is that this is not a traditional CSR model. I'm not an NGO coming to you and saying, give me the money and I'll transform somebody's life. I'm saying, if you decide to do this, please do it directly. So whenever you put money as a corporate, the money goes directly into the pension accounts of the subscribers or beneficiaries that you've selected. It doesn't come to pinBox ever. So I think from a governance point of view, the architecture is there. It's just a matter of converting interest to intent to actual action. And I think it's feasible to scale this further.
Fantastic. I hope to talk to you guys more often, maybe come back after 6-8 months. And if you guys have any new ideas, please know that there will always be a space for your message on this podcast, because I strongly believe in this. So that is a wrap, folks, on this episode of Paisa Vaisa. My guest, Parul Seth, Khanna, co-founder and director, and Gautam Bhardwaj, co-founder and director, pinBox Solutions. Parul, Gautam, thank you. Thank you so much for doing this for our listeners.
Thank you so much, Anupam.
Thank you so much.
It was a privilege to be on your show. Thanks for having us.
Kind words. Thank you. And listeners,
Thank you so much, Anupam.
Thanks, Parul. And listeners, like I said, please pass this message on to people that you know, because it's an important one. I'll repeat the number for you: 08024002000. So just WhatsApp them and take this process forward. And that's a wrap. Listeners, if you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on our social media. We are IVM Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. You want to reach out to me, I'm your host, Anupam Gupta, B50 on Twitter. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for listening to Paisa Vaisa. And listeners, if you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on our social media. We are IVM Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. And if you want to reach out to me, I'm your host, Anupam Gupta, B50 on Twitter. And thank you so much for listening to Paisa Vaisa.
No material on the show should be considered as financial advice. The material on the show is for informational purposes only. Please consult a financial advisor before taking any investment decision.
Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Storytellers and Storytellers, Vineet talks to acclaimed filmmaker Nikhil Advani about his latest web series, Rocket Boys. On Paisa Vaisa, Anupam talks to Nitin Gupta, founder and CEO at Uni, about their new Pay 1/3 card. On Ryan Organics, with Subaya, founder of Sweat, bursts some pretty pervasive myths around fitness for women with Kunal. The Simplified hosts deconstruct all there is to artificial intelligence with AI practitioners Karthik and Shivam. And on All Things Policy, the Takshashila folk discuss evolving notions of warfare with the advent of digital technologies. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our others for that matter, please do tell a friend. Don't forget to rate us on any other platforms that you're listening to us, whether it's a rating, whether it's a review, it all helps. And do remember to check us out on YouTube. We have a number of channels. They're available on ivmpodcast.com/YouTube. And finally, I would like to thank our sponsors this week, Bank of Baroda, CoinSwitch, Kuber, and HDFC Life Insurance. Thank you so much for making this possible.
IVM